Welcome to Great Power Politics. In today's class, we will look at Russia as another declining power. After our last class where we talked about the European Union and the potential of the EU being a declining power. I think Russia is also a really interesting case as the successor of the Soviet Union and therefore one of the two superpowers after the Second World War. Russia is of course a country with vast military and nuclear capabilities, and therefore it's really influential in international politics due to its military strength, but also its role in international organizations like the United Nations is undisputable. And Russia is a very active player in many of the current conflicts, including issues like the Syrian conflict and others, and especially also in the Ukraine at the moment. So at the same time, the Russian economy has been in decline for quite a long time, and we don't have the same kind of economic strength of Russia as it has in terms of military and also its political clout. So this duality I would like to explore a bit more in this class and understand whether Russia is indeed a declining power and where it will head in the future. Okay, so stay with me and I will go right into the slides. Thank you.
What do we see on this slide? The declining power, Russian Federation. We do see two kind of maybe key pictures. One is on the top is the Kremlin, and on the bottom is its leader, Vladimir Putin. For the last roughly 20 years, he has been leading Russia. So the Kremlin actually shows that the power of the country for a very long time. So we have to see that Russia has been extremely influential in European politics, but actually on the global stage as well in world politics since, let's say, maybe the 17th century. So the Kremlin is a good symbol for how powerful this country has been for a very long time. So in a way, it's very the power position of Russia can be seen very comparable with the power position of some of the other European powers. Having said that, of course, it became a key player during the Soviet Union, and then accelerate beyond the level of power of other European countries. It is of course a very, very big country, the biggest geographically, the biggest country in the world. And what we do know as well, why we often see it as a declining power, is because of the changes it had after the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union disassembled during Glasnost and Perestroika, which are very familiar terms for you, I'm sure. But it still remains this very big country with lots of resources, lots of other factors which make it very powerful. And one of these factors is on the pictures below. We do see here Vladimir Putin, maybe in a not so flattering position, although I have heard that he likes to be seen in this kind of hands-on position. But in a way, he is really influential in terms of the Russian power position. Why? Because he has kind of stabilized the country and kind of taken from its let's say democratic aspirations after the end of the Cold War, has taken it a step back, has moved much more into an authoritarian direction, but at the same time has exerted power internally over its own people, but also power externally to become a more important player on the world stage again. So I think we kind of see these two kind of key factors, see why we can see Russia maybe not so declining as a power. I will go on to other factors which maybe point in the other direction just in a minute, but I want you to keep this in mind before we actually start. So, of course, if we look at it as in a very brief overview, we can see that it's a humongous country in terms of territory. It's twice the size of the US or China in terms of territory. But the population size is not very high. It has a concentrated population in the European part of the country, a little bit at the east coast here as well, with Vladivostok, etc. But many big parts of the country are tundra and not very kind of strongly populated, but also not economically strongly used. So we have a size of the population which is a little bit, which is a bit bigger than the population, the size of the population in Japan. So it's around 145 million people, while Japan has around 125 million people. This population is highly concentrated in the western part of the country, and then it has a very big territory which is much less populated. Another interesting aspect of Russia is that it has limited access to warm water. Why do I say warm water? Because it has access to oceans along the Nordic coast, but most of it is permanently frozen, so being so close to the North Pole, so it can't be used for commercial shipping. There are ports in Vladivostok and in the east generally, which can be used for commercial shipping, but they are not as relevant because this part of of Russia is not so strongly populated. So the key kind of ports are really along the North Sea here in the north, like St. Petersburg, etc., and also about the Black Sea in the southwest. These are the kind of the important parts for it, and has always been like a strategic difficulty for Russia. The economy is also, it's primarily about exporting primary resources. What do we mean with primary resources? Especially oil, gas, but also timber, some diamonds and precious metals as well. But really the key kind of industry is the provision of oil and gas for, at the one hand, for China, at the other hand, and that's maybe the most important one, for the European Union and European countries. There are kind of interesting discussions about pipelines between Russia and Europe going on. So while there's a kind of tension between the two parts, is still the gas supply in Europe is heavily kind of dependent on Russia in itself. So of course, as I said, Russia is especially known for its predecessor, the Soviet Union, USSR, as a key kind of the competitor to the United States as a superpower. Excuse me. And so this part as kind of being the country which follows up on the Soviet Union, which is also inherited all its nuclear weapons, its seat in the Security Council. It is still a very important player on the political stage. And so we can say, maybe if we want to kind of make a very rough cut overview over Russia, we can say that economically, the country might be less important than other players we have discussed until now in this class. but politically it is a key player, and especially militarily in terms of its large nuclear arsenal. Okay, before we go into the current situation of Russia, I want to give a very quick overview of the chronology of the Soviet Union and Russian political development. This is not so. I will do it a very rough and maybe too rough job at times. The reason why I want to show this is really just to remind you about how important the position of Russia has been in the last century. So the key kind of points here is the Bolshevik seizure of power, which then kind of created a civil war and led to the communist erection and the development of a communist Soviet Union. And so in this way, this kind of framed everything which came afterwards. So in terms of its economic and socio-economic maybe position, the then Soviet Union placed itself completely differently than the rest of Europe, which kind of followed an idea of a market economy, maybe liberal or social democratic market economy, which is based on capitalist kind of basic ideas. So we did have this really kind of already in the earlier stages. We had this competition between a communist, a socialist political system and the Western capitalist political system. What is really important to understand is that in 1929, Stalin raised to power, and during that period, the period of his power, he was became a very strong, brutal, authoritarian leader. Which has kind of like, I'm sure you know, has kind of lots of controversy over mass killings and gulags, etc. So in a way, very authoritarian player, but also kind of making Russia on the global stage again quite strong. It was of course involved in the world wars as well, and especially in the Second World War. It is important to remind you that it was one of the Allied forces. So the Soviet Union was fighting together with the UK, France, and the United States against Germany, in this war, and subsequently won the Second World War. This led to things like this collaboration then kind of led to a combined occupation of Germany. But already in this early stage, we know that especially the UK and the United States were not necessarily positive about the Soviet Union and its leader, but rather kind of had this collaboration out of strategic reasons, rather than they felt like necessarily being good collaborator. And so already before the end of the war with the Second World War with Germany, plans have been enacted how to deal with the new competitors, the Soviet Union, from a European perspective, from a British-US perspective. So the end of the one conflict was really the rise of the other conflict, and this kind of conflictual behavior between the West and the Soviet Union led to the separation of Germany, East and West Germany, and the buildup of the Iron Curtain, which was all under during the time of power of Stalin. Of course, this has kind of continued. Several Soviet leaders Khrushchev, where the Soviet Union tried to get kind of have a more critical view on Stalin, the de-Stalinization in a way, and the kind of moving back from some of the policies Stalin has kind of inclinated. And also then the area of Brezhnev, which was much more a consensual and kind of moving towards the West in terms of maybe kind of talking to them. But in the sense that this is in the midst of the Cold War, where the conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States was on its height, and also the production of weapons, and especially nuclear weapons, was on its height. So what we have then later on is that, especially after the change of to Mikhail Gorbachev in '85, we had a change in the political era as well. The confrontational perception towards the West was reduced. There were the idea was to have reforms, which then lead into into a reform of the political and economic system of the Soviet Union. This, in a way, kind of was the starting point of the collapse of the USSR, which then actually kind of led to a de-assembly of the USSR, with its Eastern allies, with its Western allies in terms of the Eastern Bloc, so the European countries, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and then also a secession of the Soviet Union in itself, with the Baltic states to become independent, and several other extras also becoming independent. Especially the biggest one, of course, of note is the Ukraine in this way. But what we do find is that then there was a very close kind of connection towards the West. It was like the idea to have a democratization of then Russia, and also market economies have been adapted. The kind of key the president who took over from Gorbachev was Yeltsin. He was the first one being elected by popular vote. However, this kind of created lots of difficulties, which I will kind of talk about a little later in this lecture, in terms of rampant corruption and problems to adjust the economic model. And so under the period of Yeltsin, we see a lot of, especially economic deterioration within the country. Then in 1999, of course, after the financial crisis in '98, Putin took over, so he was elected in 1999, but he took over in 2000. And from then on, in various permutation, having, as I see, 2017 kind of switching with Medvedev, the presidency, versus the prime ministerial position. So with various permutations, Putin has been in power since then. And actually, if you follow Russian news in the recent months, there's currently the attempt to change the constitution so that a continuation of Putin in power would be allowed by the constitution. And it seems quite likely that he's actually kind of taking over. What we also do see in this 20 years of leadership under Putin is that he became more and more authoritarian over time, and still there are some aspects of democratic aspects within the country, but overall it just kind of could be seen as an authoritarian system in terms of press freedom, civil liberties, and also fairness of elections, etc. We also see, as I mentioned already before, a stronger assertiveness in international power politics, and Russia becoming a key player in lots of current events. So if we kind of look, so this was a very brief overview over the chronology. I have more, and I encourage you to look at the slides in more detail in a little while. I might actually skip over a little bit of this historic things and just tell you the key factors from it. But if we kind of look at ethnicity, religion, and currency, etc., we can see that overall, despite being such a huge country, Russia is actually quite homogeneous. So in terms of the population, we do have 79 or almost 80% of the population being Russian. And there are some Tatars, Ukrainians, etc., living in the country. But for this large size, it's exceptional that it is so homogeneous. The other thing is, in terms of religion, this is also quite prominent. We do have 57% of Christian, mostly Christian, Russian Orthodox, very few, 6% of Protestants, but 49 of the population are actually Russian Orthodox. There's also a large size of non-religious people. This is because the Soviet Union, of course, as a communist country, had this kind of strong attempt to be non-religious. There's a small minority of Muslims, but overall, Christian and Christian belief is dominant, and also plays the Russian Orthodox or the Orthodox Church plays a key role in politics as well. What we do have, the Russian currency is the Russian ruble. It is, it has been not openly available on the market, and generally is a very weak currency, which makes it difficult for Russia to finance its debts, because it has to do this in a foreign currency, and in this way it's mostly the US dollar, and so it really depends on its export economy, which is generally has for a very long time not been so problematic, because oil and gas from Russia has been in high demand, especially in Europe, and therefore a foreign currency was available. But with the current oil crisis, this is slightly different, and this is hitting Russia very, very hard at the moment. So this is again a very kind of brief look at the end of the Cold War. So Perestroika, Glasnost are the reform programs by Mikhail Gorbachev, which you're very well aware of. So this Perestroika was the economic reconstruction, Glasnost, the opening up of the political debate and the political system, which also led to a democratization of the country. In a way, under Mikhail Gorbachev, the attempt was not to implode the Soviet Union, but rather actually to kind of reform it in a way to become a different player over time. As we know, this wasn't successful, and I think one of the remarkable things about Mikhail Gorbachev is that he refrained from using violence against his own citizens in order to keep the political system. So in this way, that's also one of the reasons why he got the Nobel Peace Prize. And also, he did not kind of, he also was a key player in ratification of arms control measurements and lifting of international kind of controls within the confrontation with the West. So in a way, he has been seen very kind of prominent in this perspective of a peaceful transformation of the Soviet Union towards Russia. At the other hand, within its own, within Russia, he is often seen quite critical because of course, Russia gave up lots of power it had at that time, and kind of also plummeted Russia into an economic crisis, and also in terms of under Yeltsin, especially in a crisis of leadership and a crisis of corruption. So in a way, what we need to see here is that we did have the transformation from the Soviet Union towards the Russian Federation, which more or less, not more or less, but in its key kind of terms, was peacefully, but also led to the end of the reign of Mikhail Gorbachev. And as I said before, Yeltsin rallied to become a democratic leader and took over from him. There was also the declaration of the end of the Soviet rule in the Commonwealth of Independent States with Ukraine and Belarus, signed in 1991. So in a way, under Yeltsin, we had this, as I mentioned before, the Western style market democracy and market reforms. But they were very, very quick. So in a way, what we can see in a comparison to China, where market reforms also took place, there they took place over a continuous long time, which was very, very gradual. In Russia, this reform was very quick and led to a severe financial crisis, but also led to high levels of crime and corruption. So what we do have, the kind of the oligarch class was one of the groups which really won from the transformation from the Soviet Union towards Russia. Often with close ties to the political elites, they managed to kind of get big parts of the economic wealth of the country, and so we kind of have an increase we have a very strong inequality between a small elite, which became extremely wealthy in the process, and a large part of the population, which stayed relatively poor. In a way, what I want to take away from this slide, and you can read all the details in your own time, but the important thing is that Vladimir Putin, as a successor of Yeltsin, has done kind of two key things. At the one hand, he stabilized the political economical system, not necessarily making it much fairer or much more open, but rather kind of moving it to an authoritarian system, and with his control over most of the apparatus. And that's kind of led to a situation where what is often called soft authoritarianism. So technically, it is possible to actually unelect Putin, but the situation, the way he kind of tweaked the election process, the way he interferes with political affairs of political opponent, etc., is all so kind of strongly acted that it is basically impossible for other actors to really win against him. And the kind of currently debated reform of the Russian constitution would lead to a position that he could kind of stay as president indefinitely, and further erode the possibility of a democratic change in leadership in Russia. In terms of the relationship with the United States, it's actually kind of interesting. What we do find is that even after the end of the Cold War, tensions have still been existent. In the very beginning under Yeltsin, Russia was not necessarily a key player anymore on the international stage, was kind of taking a relatively low profile, and was also kind of in some areas collaborating with the United States. This changed quite a bit under under the leadership of Putin. And also on the other side, we see some kind of interesting kind of development. Whenever a new president comes into power in the United States, what we first see is a kind of let's say honeymoon period where there's kind of lots of talk about cooperation between the United States and Russia. So this has been very prominent under under the leadership of Obama, where they tried to kind of increase increased arms control on nuclear weapons. Denuclearization of the world was big kind of points of discussion. But over the time, then the start of the Ukrainian crisis, the Crimea annexation, the Syrian conflict became the position between Russia and the United States became worse and worse. So that actually at the end it was said that Obama was hardly on speaking terms with Vladimir Putin, and both sides were kind of strongly opposing opposite action. Under Donald Trump, the leadership of Donald Trump, it was similar. In a way, quite interesting that one of the biggest crises in of the U.S. election was the interference of Russia within this election, trying to manipulate opinion via Twitter and other social media, which was in favor of the election of Trump. It's not quite clear whether there was any kind of real collaboration between Donald Trump and Russia. There has been an extensive report by Milner report, but it is not entirely clear whether this was intentional or not. But what we do know is for sure is that there has been interference by Russia in this election. So in a way, Donald Trump was quite positive about Russia in the beginning of the election, but then did not necessarily change any of the positions which were really important for Russia, which led to great frustration. So sanctions have not been lifted, and the position within the Ukraine did not change substantially. So there were not much movement in these kind of key positions for Russia. Having said that, in terms of the Syrian conflict, actually the unilateral decision of the United States to leave Syria led, and also kind of abandon its key allies there, led to a dominance of Russia in this conflict, and kind of left him some additional leverage in this conflict, which has often been, especially in the US, has been seen as very critical. The economic development in Russia was actually was done very radically under Yeltsin. He kind of implemented market reforms, which should kind of lead to a very quick transformation of the economic system. And this was a complicated process, which I kind of limit to very kind of basic observations. So there was first a list of the price control for goods, which kind of creates more a market economy. There was also entrepreneurship and small businesses encouraged, and the privatization of state-owned enterprises. Also, there was some effort to open the economy to international influences. One of the things which really went quite badly was the privatization of state-owned enterprises. So we have to see basically the complete economy was in state hands at the time of the Soviet Union. So there were really kind of lots of resources available within this in the state company. And what we had is an unequal distribution of this state-owned assets. And this led to the emergence of an elite which had much better access to these resources, and therefore kind of picked the cherry, so to speak, out of the best kind of parts of the Soviet economy, and and led it into a private market economy. And that is something which has been kind of seen as harmful for the Russian economy at large. So it was very rapid, as I said before, and high level of a kind of insider privatization with really high levels of corruption. Interesting is that citizens often get private vouchers, certificates to purchase shares from their state enterprises. But lots of the individuals actually needed these funds for others. So people who could get resources could actually buy up these vouchers. And so even though the privatization was not necessarily in the beginning intended to be so unequal, it, as a subsequent of this concentration of the private vouchers, it became very unequal as well. So this small oligarch group became very powerful in the Russian economy and the privatization, and it's also often kind of connected to organized crimes, and so we do have an elite which is often unaccountable for, and this elite is also in a way has been closely connected to political leadership as well. In terms of the Russian position in the global economy, it is far behind other Western countries, but also behind other partners like China. One of the key problems is the diversity of the Russian economy. It is focused on the primary resources, which are then kind of successfully sold, especially to the West. But in following the Ukraine conflict, the increasing level of sanctions from Western countries, especially from Europe, led to a sharp decline of the US of the Russian economy, not the US, Russian economy. Sorry about that. So what we can see a nice kind of slide where the export is like almost 70% of is from the energy and fuel resources. There are some other things like chemical products, wood, metals like rare metals, also machinery, and some very small part of agriculture. But overall, we are talking about that the backbone of the Russian economy is export of resources like oil and gas. If we look at the export markets here, this is from 2018. So we have to see that sanctions have been in place with the European Union, which limits the import of the European countries. So the biggest actor in terms of export is China. China is very concerned, or not concerned, but very eager to secure vast amounts of oil resources. One of the resources it has not too many in its own country, and therefore is becoming more and more a very important, the most important export country from Russia. Of course, Japan, Finland, several European countries and neighboring countries are also important. The United States with 2% shows like hardly any kind of economic cooperation between these or the export is not a very important export actor in this way. If we kind of take a way back from the economy, which is crumbling at the time and is much far behind the economic development of the developed countries, but also far behind the prospect of China or the prospect of India. What we do see here is that politically this picture is quite different. So Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council and a very active member in terms of blocking decisions by the UN Security Council. So it's a very prominent and self-confident actor who is not shying away from blocking issues on the global stage if they are not in their own interest. So the membership in the Security Council is a very important international political tool Russia is using to kind of further its own goals. Until the annexation of the Crimea Peninsula, Russia was also a member of the then called G8. It has been suspended since then. The G7 are kind of acting without Russia. There have been several attempts, especially from the United States under Donald Trump, to reinstate the position of Russia in and extend the system towards the G8 again. But Europe has kind of resisting this move, and since then we don't have. It doesn't look likely that Russia will become a member of this organization again. Having said that, the value of the G7 is often kind of seen declining in the future, and many people are kind of thinking that the G20 might be the 20 strongest economies might be more becoming more important where Russia is a member. Overall, we can say that Russia is a key international actor in European affairs, in Asian affairs, and on the global stage. And of course, its military capacity is very high. It has the second largest arsenal of nuclear weapons, as I mentioned already before, after the United States. It has the largest space program in the world, and it has capabilities, very large military capabilities, which makes it basically an actor which cannot be touched by any other party in the world. It has been involved in several military conflicts as well, not officially, but in recent crises like Syria and the Ukraine, it played a very dominant role and became one of the key players, which had to maybe even the most powerful player within these two conflicts. So we do see that after the end of the Cold War until now, we do see a political increase of the power position of Russia, while we do see an economic decrease. So we have this kind of crossing of different in terms of political power versus economic power. While it is very strong on the political side, it is quite weak on the economic side. We have seen in the Ukraine crisis where Russia was actively becoming a player because the Ukraine tried to become closer to the European Union, and it has always been seen that the Ukraine is a kind of a close ally of Russia and becomes its sphere of influence, if you want to say it this way. So in a way, this crisis is still ongoing. It is not resolved, and the European Union is also an important player in who tries to mediate between the different actors, but was not possible to kind of resolve this conflict yet. And it remains to be seen what the end of this conflict will be. In the Syrian conflict, Vladimir Putin was also very active, being on the side of Assad, trying to reinstate Assad as the first political leader. In times when Islamic State had taken over east of Syria, actually Russia was fighting hand in hand with the US and European forces against Islamic State. But in terms of who to support in the non-Islamist perspective, the positions varied considerably, while the West was kind of supporting the more democratic forces. Russia was supporting Assad, and as with the United States leaving the Syria, we can see that essentially Russia has been successful in this conflict by reestablishing Assad and leading him to become the first actor of Syria again. So let me kind of conclude this this discussion. And of course, it was kind of a very rough cut of any of these countries, a rough cut in terms of the power position of Russia. And what I think is really important to see is that we have a really interesting contradiction here. Russia is relatively weak economically. It's very dependent on primary resources, not much of a manufacturing economy or a knowledge economy. At the same time, it is politically very strong. It has a high level of nuclear weapons, and with its kind of active role in the UN Security Council, and generally like active foreign policy, it is a very important political actor, while economically it's a very weak actor. So I think we should kind of take this and discuss a little bit further how this fits together and how we see this country as a declining power, as a stabilizing power, as a maybe increasing power, and kind of compare it to the other powers we have looked at in terms of China, India, the European Union, and of course the United States. So I leave it here. Thank you very much.